Hello there. Okay, so this movie is about the climate changes, the global warming. You ever heard about the climate changes, right? You have heard about the climate changes, yes. But do you believe in them? Are you a person that denies the fact that we have climate changes and think that it's just about the natural cycles occurring, that we are in a hot peak now, and later on it will cool off? Well, I tell you what, stay with this movie and listen to the end of it and you will know the facts. You know, I'm a person that likes to move forward in my life with passion, joy and love, you know. I'm not a kind of fear-mongering person that likes to spread out, you know, panic and stress and guilt to people. So I just want to, you know, by this movie, if I'm gonna turn a little bit more serious, show you the real seriousness about the situation of our mother planet Earth. We have reached a kind of level of our rate of emissions now that is totally unsustainable for the coming 100 years. We have to change our direction very radically. It's not only enough, like many countries with the policies, to maintain the same level as emissions last year, you know, because the population on Earth is increasing as well. And, you know, when we get more skillful at using the resources of Mother Earth by, you know, implementing more efficient programs for manufacture, robots and industrialization, you know, people will get used to a better living standard moreover, and we will not like to lower that standard. So everything points in the direction that we will not be able to cope with the goals we should be to save a future really possible extinction here. Alright, in this video then I will, you know, talk about something about the prior extinctions here on Earth, why they happened, and a little about the evolution of Earth as well, because I believe that if you study the evolution of Earth, you know, these extremely big time scales, and if you study the origin of life and origin of the species and everything like that, you will have a much greater evaluation of our present fantastic situation here on Mother Earth. So I welcome you to this lecture. I hope you will stay with me and listen to what I have to say, because I feel this is very important. Thank you very much. This is a picture of our Milky Way seen from a distance. And let's zoom into one of its outer arms to see what we find. Here comes a big cloud, a nebula. It's interstellar matter that is forming new stars and solar systems. And finally, we come to our Earth as it was 4.5 billion years ago. You know, before this situation, I can talk about briefly how the solar system was created actually. You know, in the center of the galaxy is a very, very big energy factory, we can say. A kind of a big star that emanates cosmic energy and at the same time rotating. What is happening when this energy is from a certain distance from the center? It cools down, it aggregates, it becomes smaller clusters forming nebulas. And those nebulas are the beginning of a new sun and possibly solar system. So when this nebula is slowly rotating and it's contracting due to the gravity and electromagnetic forces and temperature lowering, it is rotating, right, the big cloud. And when it becomes smaller, it rotates faster and faster and faster and faster, because there is a law in the Newtonian physics that says that about the preservation of rotational momentum. Because the energy of the rotation cannot escape anywhere, it must preserve in the cloud. And since the cloud becomes smaller, it rotates faster and faster, okay. And when this kernel, the star, is in a certain contraction and certain rotational speed, it will emit out a kind of a disk, you know, due to the centripetal forces. And in this disk there will be cosmic dust of all the elements. And this disk in turn will, the cloud of this disk in turn will aggregate to new, bodies, and in the end will form a lot of bodies that will aggregate together to form the planets. And we have 4 inner planets and 4 outer planets, we can say, more or less. And because it is hotter the closer to the sun we are, the inner planets consist of elements that has a high melting point, because those elements were aggregating faster when it was closer to the sun, while the more gaseous elements like hydrogen, helium, water, etc., was condensing at lower temperatures, so they form the planets far outer from the sun. They are more gaseous planets. But the 4 inner planets are solid, and one of them is our planet Earth, we see here. So before this period also Earth was growing. It was small in size from the beginning and it was growing up. So this is Earth 4.5 billion years ago. Let me just start by briefly going through the different eons and time periods of the evolutionary history of Earth. Because it's my belief that we will appreciate life so much more if we understand this long process of creating all this variety of life we have today. And what's happened in these periods, so we have kind of background frame for it all. And also to understand 4.5 billion years ago, how long time that is, we can just take our present time calculation, beginning of the birth of Christ 2000 years ago, as a measure. And we go back one such more period, we arrive at pharaonic Egypt, and some other more back, we arrive at the start of our written history. And 500 such periods is 1 million years. And 1,000 of this 1 million years is 1 billion years. So now we are 4.5 billion years ago. Wow. And this period is called the Hadean period, after the Greek god of the underworld, Hades. And we can see why, because it was full of volcanic activities, the earth was burning, and it was constantly bombarded by meteorites and asteroids and so on, because the solar system at this time was very volatile. It was still in its creation phase. So, but what happened a long time, 100 millions of years time scales, was that the solar system was cooling down more and more. The activity ceased, enabling the surface of the Earth to cool down as well, and forming a crust around itself. And what's happened also by this was that the water molecules inside the Earth and around the Earth that was in a gaseous form before could condense and cool down, forming the oceans around the Earth. So about 4.1 billion years ago, first oceans existed around the Earth. And now we can say, some basic ingredients for life to emerge. And that is the water, the oceans, the elements in the water like carbon, phosphor, nitrogen, oxygen, etc. And we have the sunlight, the UV radiation, and some other components here. So let's move on to the next period that we identify, called the Archean period. Archean coming from the Greek word archeus, meaning beginning or origin. Yes, beginning of life. And this is something very amazing and fantastic, that life emerged from non-life forms. To me, I've always think that nature has 2 sides to it. Partly the kind of side that we can study through science and research about, that follows causal principles, and the other side, that kind of inner side to life, to always want to evolve in a more complex forms, So these sides together somehow created life in this period. And the life from beginning was just about forming some basic amino acids and enzymes that could, catalyst some processes that could preserve a kind of shape in a form for a certain time span. That is one characteristic of life. And then also could replicate itself. Like this DNA, RNA strands that is like this double helix with the genomes in it, like ladders. And it tears itself apart, and then it reveals its other sides to to form a copy of itself. These kind of mechanisms were invented in this period, and it was used by some very simple bacteria called the prokaryote. Pro means before and karyote means nut or kernel. So it was before the real cell, this kind of bacteria. And there were some different kind of bacteria. Among else, there was one bacteria that liked the sulfur-rich environments that we have still today in sulfur-rich caves of the earth. And the other was the blue-green algae or the cyanobacteria that still today multiplies in the ocean. And we ingest it actually as this superfood like spirulina and chlorella. And I will stay a little on this blue-green algae because, you know, the Archean period was a very long period, ranging 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago. So it had a very, very long time to, you know, make different experiments in the ocean to create the best forms of life for this time and the bacteria and so on. So, but what was coming also in this period was the photosynthesis process. The chloroplaster molecule was invented, we can say. This molecule that is involved in, you know, converting from water and carbon dioxide. It split the water molecule in hydrogen and oxygen by the help of sunlight, and then it combines the hydrogen with the carbon to form carbohydrates and outputs oxygen, deoxygen in the atmosphere. So this was a fantastic process of the photosynthesis was coming here in the blue-green algae. And at first, you know, the blue-green algae, there were no oxygen in the atmosphere and in the ocean. So the blue-green algae was anaerobic algae. It meant that it couldn't stand oxygen because oxygen is actually quite a corrosive and reactive and very aggressive element that oxidizes everything it comes into contact with, kill it, you know. And so what's happening was that there arrived a great oxygen crisis, killing a lot of these anaerobic bacteria. So life has to adapt to this more oxygen-rich atmosphere that was coming from the photosynthesis process by another kind of structure coming from the mitochondrial element that actually ingest oxygen together with sugars, fats and proteins to create energy. And this mitochondria first was just in form of another kind of bacteria that had a symbiotic relationship with the other bacteria so that they could stand the oxygen coming. Later on, the other bacteria soaked up the mitochondria inside its structure to make it a part of its cytoplasm. So that was the forerunner of the real cell as we know it today, the cell with the real kernel and organelles and cell walls and cytoplasm and everything like that. It was a very, very interesting process. Life often starts with two simpler organisms starting in a symbiotic relationship, and then they merge together to form a more complex organism. So that's a typical development of life. So this oxygen crisis meant the beginning of a new period called the Proterozoic period. Protero means before or earlier, zoic means animal life. So this Proterozoic period was ranging from 2.5 billion years ago to about 541 billion years ago. It was a very, very long period of 2 billion years, you know, almost half the time frame of the Earth history. So in this very long time, this cell, you know, could evolve and become more and more advanced and refined. And also this period involved some period of long ice ages ranging from 50-60 million years long. And one believes that this has to do with the Earth rotational axis leaning towards the Sun, meaning that the other side was in the shadow and was cooling down very much. So the cells has to, you know, be able to warm itself up more, and that's meant clustering together with other cells. So this was the beginning of the multicellular tissues and life forms. They were still very, very small and insignificant, like the planktons and so on in the oceans, but still it was a great, great evolutionary step in this long period of life. Natura non facit saltus. It's a Latin phrase that means nature doesn't favor any jumps or leaps. That's really true, because in evolution the life forms has gradually evolved from previous life forms. Evolution doesn't reinvent things, it reuses the previous designs, so it's very efficient in that sense. For example, in our gut system in the human body, we have remnants from the Archean period of the anaerobic bacteria that was created there. It's the same structures, you know. And when our cells has also been created a billion years ago. It's the same design, and we can see that our heart and lungs and organs resemble very much some kind of primitive life in the oceans, like the sea cucumbers and jellyfishes and such, you know, like they are just an organ living independently. So all this we have inside has once been independent life forms that has clustered together in a symbiosis and forming a greater shape. So we are like some evolutionary map inside ourselves of the whole evolutionary history. So that's quite interesting. And the next period is called the Phanerozoic period. Phanero meaning visible and zoic meaning animal life. So this is really where the life starts to explode in an exponential manner, you know. The complexity of life arrives, and it starts to arrive, you know, like worms, mollusks, jellyfishes, and especially in the oceans it was beginning to thrive. And this is called the Cambrian explosion. It's about the multicellular, you know, life organisms as we know them today. So the evolutionary tree is starting to branching off very much here. So let's fast forward to about 300 million years ago, arriving at the so-called Permian Age. Maybe you've heard about the giant and great continent of Pangaea. Yes, this was the time of Pangaea continent. The Pangaea continent is simply the tectonical plates merging together, because the tectonic plates moves a lot in periods of tens of millions of years, and sometimes they are merging together and sometimes they are more apart, you know. And this time they were apart in this giant Pangaea continent, and around this was one big ocean called the Panthalassic Ocean. And life now has already creeped up on land in form of amphibians like turtles, lizards, alligators and frogs and so on. And you know, you can picture this period as coming from another planet or something like that, like from the movie Avatar or something, because the plants and animals were not at all like the ones we have today. Earth has been through a lot of extinction events, renewing its gene tree somehow, you know, but in this period there were, you know, more fern-like structures, very, very big ones, and there were a lot of lavas and mosses and mushrooms that were very big, both in the oceans and on land. And it was simply very, very different from today. It was very hot, the atmosphere had a lot of carbon dioxide, and you know, everything was on a very, very big scale, at least the plants. And also the insects, they were much, much larger than today. Okay, so let's take a closer look now on why this Permian period ended. And we are now about 252 million years ago. And archaeological investigations has shown that in an area around Siberia, the so-called Siberian Traps, it's an area as large as Western Europe, very large area. There were a lot of volcanic eruptions around this time. And also in an area in China around the May Mountains, the Meishan Traps, were also eruptions. And those eruptions were thought to have came because of, you know, plate movements, plate tectonic movements that were coming together and forming cracks in the earth, giving rise to these eruptions. And this meant that a lot of earthbound coal was burning up and releasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So what was happening during these 50 to 60,000 years of these eruptions, it was so long time, yes, was that the atmosphere was first filled with salt and maybe hindering the rays of the sun coming down to the earth, and maybe the climate first was cooler actually. But after a while, when the salt was dissolving and the carbon dioxide still was rising from the burning, the temperature, the global warming was increasing. And it has been shown that during these 60,000 years, the global raise of the temperature was about 8 degrees Celsius, and the carbon dioxide increase in the atmospheres was 2000 parts per million. To understand this figure, we can compare it to the parts in the atmosphere around the Industrial Revolution. There were 280 parts per million there. So this was a massive raise of carbon dioxide, and clearly having a close relation to the warming of 8 degrees Celsius there. And this meant also that, you know, when this carbon dioxide fall down in the ocean, it was converted to carbonic acid there, making the oceans acidic, lowering the pH there. And this meant that the 96% of the species in the ocean, the different species in the ocean, were killed, actually extincted. And about 70% on the land were also extinct. So this period was really called the Great Dying, and one can understand why. Quite tragic considering how beautiful life has been in the Permian Age. And you know, it took nature maybe 30-40 million years to rebuild this damage, to rebuild the evolutionary tree again, in form of other species. Okay, so this extinction event between the Permian and Triassic periods, the Great Dying, meant that the Earth, the nature, left room for new species to develop. And this was the branching off of the reptilian branch of the evolutionary tree. So we can say that the Earth was overtaken by the reptilians, and they were growing in size, and we know them today as the dinosaurs. And the area of the dinosaurs lasted for 252 million years ago up to 66 million years ago. This is called the Mesozoic period, the middle animal life period, we can say. And this period was divided in three different periods: the Triassic period, the Jurassic period, and the Cretaceous period. And you know, if life during the Permian continent more has been about life in the oceans and learning a little to creep up on land with a kind of big flat bodies, you know, a bit clumsy. During this development of the reptilians, the life learned more to maneuver on land, transport themselves on land, and to run and to balance, you know, to defy the gravity in different ways. And they developed their brain according to these capacities. And also this part of the brain that is called the autonomous nervous system that governs our instincts, and the sympathetic part of it that governs this fight or flight response. You know, when two animals on land met, they looked each other in the eyes, and each must decide if it was time to fight or fly. You know, that's kind of split-second decision where, you know, a kind of instinctual capacity of the reptilian brain that were developed in this period. And this is the innermost part, by the way, of our own brain. So this has followed us in the evolution up to the human being. The other parts being the limbic and the neocortex parts over that reptilian brain. So this was much about developing, you know, the balance, the way of transportation, and the instincts. Because reptilians has no limbic brain, it means that they cannot have feelings or memories of past traumas and so on. So even if they look very evil and ugly and monstrous, they didn't know anything about themselves. They just acted on instincts and were, you know, live in the moment in this way. And the life between these periods, the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, were that some difference were that in the first period the dinosaurs were more, you know, lower, wider, and not so big. And in the Jurassic period they were growing in size more and more. Some of them could even be up to 20-30 meters high, weighing a baffling 100 tons, like for example the big Argentinosaurus. And they were herbivores, plant eaters. They need their height to munch off the leaves on very, very high trees, because the trees were quite big in those times. There was a lot of carbon dioxide making the trees grow bigger and faster. And also the birds were a branch from the reptilians to take off, because the reptilians, some of them started to develop the forearms to big wings and started to be able to fly. So this was also the evolution when we learned to fly and maneuver in the space, you know. That kind of branch, that is the birds branch, so they're coming from the reptilians, the dinosaurs. And the next period was the Cretaceous period, and this period is also the famous Tyrannosaurus rex were developed in the later period of this period, and a lot of other dinosaurs come into play. So they grew in size even more. But the common misconception I want to tell is that the dinosaurs was not so big as we think. Most of them range from being a little bird to about maybe an elephant in size or so. And there were just some exemplars, some species that grew very, very big. Tyrannosaurus rex was not so big as we see in the movie Jurassic Park, by the way. And also in this period, the Cretaceous period, the last of the dinosaur periods, the flowering way of reproduction were invented in nature. So the flowers were coming to existence for the first time, they were created. And this was about 125 million years ago. So some changes both in the plant kingdom and in the animal kingdom were coming. And throughout the dinosaur age, the mammals were quite insignificant as a branch in the evolutionary tree. There were some small species of mammals, but in the later period of the Cretaceous period, they were developing more and more. And especially after the second extinction event, which we should look about soon, that extincted dinosaurs, the mammals were taking over more and more. And the mammals, the big difference between the mammals and dinosaurs, besides the fact that the mammals don't lay eggs and some other differences, is that the mammals developed a second layer of their brain, the limbic system, that enabled them to feel and to have memories and so on top of their instinctual brain. So the last of the dinosaur epochs, the Cretaceous period, lasted about 79 million years, and the peaks were broken by a big heavenly body, a big asteroid or meteorite that was hit the Earth near the Gulf of Mexico. And this body had a diameter of 180 kilometers, a very, very big and heavy body coming in a high speed against the Earth. And you can imagine that it must have fallen inside the Earth, the crust of the Earth must have crashed and it falling inside, and it would have created a lot of, waves under the Earth that were propagated. Firstly, it would have meant that a big wave of infrared heat would have, spread out around this impact that would kill all animals that were exposed to this wave immediately. A big surrounding around the impact. And secondly, a lot of soot from the burning of the eruptions and forest burning and everything must have come up in the atmosphere, making the heaven very black and dark, maybe making the climate a bit cooler to begin with. But later on, of course, from the eruptions and burning of these big impacts, the Earth must have been filled with carbon dioxide, and the climate become warmer and warmer, as we can show when we look at historical data. So it can be shown that no dinosaur, no big reptilian above 55 pounds, besides some turtles, crocodiles, and some other more amphibian animals actually survived this big extinction event. We cannot find any remnants after this big impact on Earth. This meant that the Earth was clear for another branch to flourish that had not taken off really, that really wanted to flourish on Earth, and that was the branch of the mammals. So they begin to branch off now in the evolutionary tree. And the mammals is divided into a lot of branches, like the four-legged mammals and the primates, the monkeys and so on, and later on the humans. And one thing is that the mammals have a kind of secondary brain also on top of the reptilian brain that's called the limbic system, or the limbic cortex. And that part of the brain is responsible for our feelings, that is very much related to memories and ability to feel traumas and to learn from past mistakes and so on, and memories. And so this part of the brain were developed. So what can we learn about these extinction events? Earth has underwent several extinction events in its history, over 10, but 5 of them are quite major, and we have mentioned 3, 4, and one of them I mentioned was the extinction events during the Permian-Triassic periods, the Great Dying. And if that extinction event was from below the Earth in the form of eruptions or volcanic activities, the second extinction events that ended the dinosaur age where from above, from a big meteorite hitting the Earth. And we can just ask ourselves, are we in the middle of a third extinction event right now, or will we be able to steer the direction otherwise? And will this third extinction event in that case be from the middle of the Earth, from the epidermis of Earth, informed human beings? We can just ask ourselves that. And it's a pretty scary perspective. Okay, let's move on to the present day situation and see if we can learn something from these historical extinction events to apply to the present day situation in relation to the increase of the carbon dioxide and the increase of temperature. But let me first start by addressing the question about the so-called natural cycles and what they mean and how they affect the situation. Because there are people that claim that this global warming is just another natural cycle, a peak of a natural cycle. Yes, it's true that we are in the hot period of a cycle right now. And for about 10 to 15,000 years ago, we were in an ice age. So this cycle has a period of about 100,000 years. So we have an ice age each about 100,000 years back in time. And the reason for that is that the inclination of the Earth axis is changing. And in an ice age it's leaning more towards the sun, making the backside of the Earth be cast in shadow and making that cooler, so the ice is coming out. And the Earth would be in an ice age at those periods. And when it's hotter, the inclination of the Earth axis is more 90 degrees to the sun, making its even heat throughout the Earth when it's rotating. So this is, this kind of rotation of the Earth axis creates these periods of warm fluctuations and ice ages. And we can find out that the carbon dioxide concentration during the ice ages has been on around 250 to 280 parts per million during the hot periods, and down to about 200 parts per million during the ice ages. And the reason why it is rising in the hot periods is because of the heat makes the carbon dioxide in the oceans to evaporate, thus making the concentration of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere higher. So let's now look what's happening the latest 150 years or so. Let's look at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when we really start to use the fossil fuels, coal-based fuels, on a larger scale. So, year 1880, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was on about 280 parts per million. And that's natural for a warm period of the cycle. But if we log into the page CO2 Earth page to see what the reading is right now, and I did this today, we see that it's on a staggering 406 parts per million. So just in about 140 years it has increased from 280 parts per million to 406 parts per million. And of course this increase has nothing to do with the natural cycle, because these cycles are very, very long. This is just on 140 years and is correlating perfectly to the rise in the coal from the earth, burning of the coal of the earth, related to the Industrial Revolution and the factories spreading out. And this rise in carbon dioxide to 406 parts per million also meant a rise in temperature globally of about 1 degree Celsius. That might not sound so high, but if we continue to rise these carbon dioxide levels, remember what happened during the Permian-Triassic extinction events, the Great Dying. It was rising of altogether 2000 ppm in the atmosphere and giving a rise of 8 degrees Celsius globally. And then we talk about things could happen here on Earth for the species. Okay, let me now go over to explain a little about the cycle of the carbon dioxide here on Earth, the natural cycle. We talked before about two types of cells. One cells that is in the plants that are emitting oxygen, right, through the photosynthesis and taking in carbon dioxide, and the other cells, like we are consisting of, that breathe in oxygen and emits out carbon dioxide. And between those two life components there ought to be a balance, you know. So the netto between those should not exceed a certain number, because if it does, it means that the carbon dioxide content for every year is increasing more and more and more. Let me show this principle by some glasses here. So in this bucket here we have the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere, representing by this level here now, this water. And this level up here is the danger zone, where it has risen so much that we are in real threat of mass extinction. And we talk about that level later, what that can be. And this is the additional carbon dioxide from, you know, the cell breathing of the microorganisms in the earth and in the oceans, forestal fires and decomposition of organic matter over the globe. The natural carbon dioxide emissions, we can say. And this is represented by the plant-based cells, the algae in the oceans, the plants and trees and so on that absorbs this carbon dioxide. And this represents the additional carbon dioxide from human intervention, from burning of fossil fuel. And let's assume in this experiment that this part is constant. Actually, and each cycle here represents 1 year. But actually this part is not constant, it is increasing for every year. But let's assume that politicians, by some magic reason, determine that we should not emit any more carbon dioxide, we should keep the rate constant for every year and not increasing it. Let's see what happens. So we start. We add the carbon dioxide, and we add the carbon dioxide from the humans here, and the absorption of the carbon dioxide from natural processes. Let's fast forward. Okay, let's question what might happen then if the carbon dioxide continue to increase in the atmosphere, making the global temperature to increase. What is the nearest scenarios here on Earth? What will happen in the coming hundreds of years? Well, first of all, of course, the ices around the poles will melt more and more. And the melting of these ices will mean that the animal life there, such as the polar bears, the walruses, the whales and every kind of animal there will be affected, and they will probably be extincted. And it will also mean that in the near future for us here in the north, in Sweden where I live, we are dependent on a stream called the Gulf Stream that keeps this zone in a temperate climate. The Gulf Stream will be hit by these cold streams from the melting ices and will be redirected and cooling down, so we will maybe have a little ice age here. But of course this will also be counteracted by the raising of temperature globally, so maybe that will not happen to such a great extent anyway. But also the melting of the ices means that the levels of water will increase, so the near cities around the oceans, we have a great number of big cities that is located near the oceans because of the proximity to the oceans and the shipment pathways and so on. They will be submerged, and the topography near the oceans will be submerged in water. And also, when we talk about carbon dioxide is also increasing in the ocean, in the atmosphere, meaning that more carbon dioxide falling down in oceans will mean a conversion to carbonic acid there, making the oceans more acidic. And data can be shown that from 1750 to now, the pH in the water has decreased from 8.2 to 8.1, so it has become more acidic with 0.1 pH. And this is maybe some not so much, but everyone that has an aquarium knows that what happened when the pH is lowering, you know. It will kill the fishes there and making the anaerobic bacteria and algae and so on to take over. So that's exactly what will happen in the oceans. The coral reefs will wither away because of the acidity in the oceans, and the higher animals, the higher fishes will die because of this acidification, and the oceans will be taken over by some algae and some simpler life forms like the jellyfishes, the mollusks and so on. So the oceans will be more slimy, more oxygen deprived and so on. And what happens if the animal life in the oceans disappear? Well, every land animal life that is dependent on the ocean life will also be affected and be extinct in the long run, and it will affect the whole animal life on the planet Earth. And in addition to this, because of the raising of the temperature globally, this in itself will also affect the animals on land and water. So, you know, if we take as a comparison the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere during the Permian-Triassic extinction event, the Great Dying, we said that the raise there was 2,000 parts per million in the atmosphere during these 50-60,000 years of these eruptions. And it meant that the global warming was 8 degrees Celsius. And I'm pretty sure that such a high rise in global warming will mean, you know, the end of the higher life of the fauna we have here. And maybe the human race, you know, because we are quite cunning and intelligent, will find ways to survive quite long in this way. But I'm sure it will not be long before we have a new extinction event if we let it go that far. So, you know, let's take wisdom from the history, what has happened in these extinction events. And let's ask now, we have talked about the present situation, we have talked about the evolution of the Earth, we have talked about previous extinction events, some of them at least, because Earth has went under several extinction events, five of them very major, but we have focused on 2 very major, before the dinosaurs and after the dinosaurs, and the present situation. But let's ask now about the future. You know, is there a way to kind of predict what will happen if we have different scenarios on the emissions of carbon dioxide? Let's say, for example, what happens if we continue like we do today, and let's say also that the population is increasing like it has been the last 100 years or so. What will happen in that scenario? How long would it take before we reach this kind of limit of 2000 ppm increase that we have as a kind of number of extinction here, just as a figure? What will happen, and what will happen if we manage to stabilize the emissions and keep it at the current levels? What will happen, and what will happen if we might totally, you know, decrease the emissions and go over to, you know, emission-free energy sources like the solar sources, the sun, wind and water energy sources? That is, of course, what we wish and the best scenario. Let's analyze this. And actually I made a spreadsheet in Excel to make, you know, some statistics based on data I found on Google from the World Bank of data. Alright, in this spreadsheet I try to calculate the different outcomes depending on how fast we emit the greenhouse gases in our world the coming hundreds of years, or if we change, hopefully, our policy for the better. And this, please follow me here because this is pretty interesting. And I am deriving this from a public database on Google that measures the greenhouse gas emission in units of metric tons, that is 1,000 kilograms per person and per year. So in this analysis I divide the world in different parts according to their social economic factors, industrialization and so on. And I measure Asia excluding China here, and China and Africa, South Africa, Europe, Latin America, USA, Canada and Australia. And I start at the value of 2010. For example, Asia, excluding China, had 4,000 kilograms per person year of carbon dioxide emissions. China had 7.85, Europe about 10, United States 21. And I estimate, for example, that China will remain unchanged the coming years to come. Probably they will increase actually, but I want not to exaggerate in this calculation. And Asia will increase from 4 to 7.85, that is the level of China, in the next coming 100 years because of more industrialization in India and developing countries there. South Africa from 3 to 8.8 in coming 300 years. Prediction of their industrialization to come. South Africa will remain unchanged, Europe will remain unchanged, and I predict that, for example, United States and Canada will halve their emissions from now and 150 years in the future, and also Australia. And also I take into account here the population, the increase of the population. So, for example, 1990, Asia excluding China had about 2 billion people, and 2010, 2.8 billion people. And so this increase and this prediction of the future curve is also taken into account in this formula I have calculated here with. And so we can, for example, put in a number here to see what the emissions were in this year, 2010. And we can see that the total emission, when we calculate the total population and the different parts and emissions of greenhouse gases, were about 44 billion tons of greenhouse gases. If we take 76% of that, we arrive at the number of carbon dioxide emissions, because carbon dioxide is about 76% of the total greenhouse gases. And we arrive at about 34%. And actually that's pretty accurate if we look at the statistics from 2010. So, and besides 2017 now, it's predictions based on this formula. So we can put in 2020, we arrive at 38 billion tons, 2030, we arrive at 32, etc., etc. And here I have measured each decennium starting from 2010, 2020, 2030, and measured totally billion tons of carbon dioxide during 10 years. I've simply taken the value from 2020 and multiplied that by 10 to reach the number of 10 years here. That's actually an understatement. So, also in this column I accumulate the value in the atmosphere, because we have already reached that point where the atmosphere is saturated by emissions. The oceans cannot any longer convert the extra carbon dioxide we emit, so it will stay in the atmosphere to the next year and just accumulate, And to measure the parts per million in the atmosphere, there is a formula that we take that 1 part per million in the atmosphere equals 7.81 gigatons of carbon dioxide. So this is gigatons accumulated over 10 years, over the year. And we divide this by 7.81 and we arrive at the value of parts per million in the atmosphere. So we can see here that 1880 the value was 280 parts per million, and 2010, according to this formula, it was 390. It's pretty accurate actually. And 2020 it will be 438, 2030 493, 2040 554. And this is where you should be shocked, because the increase is pretty fast here, So we see here how it increases for every decade. Already 2100 we reach over 1000 parts per million in the atmosphere. And we need only to go forward to 2190. That is about, just 180 years from now or so, not even that, where we reach a value that the increase has been about 2000 parts per million, the same increase that happened during the permanent drastic extinction event and the following rates of 8 degrees Celsius global warming. So this is pretty shocking. It's not even 200 years until we reach that number based on this extrapolation and calculations here. And if we take a more mild, calculation where we say that we stop further emissions of carbon dioxide, we stay at the level we emit this year. And although the population is increasing and countries are industrialized, we say that we don't emit more than 3 ppm yearly that we have done for this year. This means that it will take another 721 years to reach that level of 2,000 parts per million increase. So about year 2650 or so, we will reach that extinction point, So this is pretty, markant and serious and shocking facts. All right, let's look at the historical data once again to put things in our present situation into perspective. And this, I will tell you now, should really shock you. The extinction events during the Permian-Triassic events, where the earthbound cold matters were released in the atmosphere during a period of 60,000 years and killed 96% of the species in the oceans and 70 on land. This is considered to be a rather quick extinction for the whole species of the nature, the most of the species of the nature, and it took 30-40 million years to rebuild it. So let's have that as perspective. But what is happening right now, today, is that we are releasing carbon dioxide in a speed that is 60 times faster today and during this event. If we log into the webpage www.co2.earth, we can see that the reading of the carbon dioxide for 1997 was on about 307 parts per million. And today it's almost 410 parts per million. This means an increase in 40 parts per million in just 20 years. So to reach this level of 2,000 parts per million increase that happened during the Permian-Triassic extinction event, with 8 degrees Celsius globally warming, to reach that level now, it will only take, if we maintain the carbon dioxide as a present level, 1,000 years more, then the Earth will be at the same state as then. And do you think, just because there are humans on Earth, that we will somehow be prevented from that situation that happened before? Of course not. The facts are the same. Such a raise in the global temperature and carbon dioxide will affect the present nature, maybe even more than back then. That is a total extinction. So this should really, really wake you up to see that what we are doing now is absolutely, totally heading in the wrong direction towards the cliff, for a very fast extinction. Okay. So what about solutions then? What about the future? Well, I strongly believe in the human initiative. I strongly believe that if we understand on a clear level what the situation is about, how serious it is, we will act on that, that's for sure. That's just, the thing is that people do not take this really seriously. That's the grave issue of it, because something that don't threaten you immediately, not even in your lifetime, you will not devote so much time on. But as I said before, with the kind of butterfly effect, that what we can do, if we do a little thing now, like spreading this message through videos like this, talking to our friends and so on, this can lead to massive change in the future that will save billions of potential human lives in the coming 10s, 20 or million years, where humanity could flourish and have a great time here, instead of a total extinction 1,000 years from now. Just because we right now want a little more easy money and comfort and easy transportation, that's ridiculous if you think about it. So really, it's, first of all, it's a shocking truth to understand this and to get enlightened to this kind of situation. Secondly, there is many groups of people that already live in an eco-friendly way. If they live in a house, maybe they have a house that are driven by solar panels, and they take their water from their land outside and they recycle their waste and plant, vegetables that they grow themselves a lot, and maybe in the colder seasons that buy vegetables, but maybe they are vegans, so they make sure they don't, live and eat in a very eco-friendly manner. And when they need to transport themselves somewhere, maybe they choose to use bikes as much as possible and so on, and they can do the public transportations. Or if you need a car, if you want a car, we may choose a car that have very low carbon dioxide emissions, or preferably an electrical car. And I really like these new leaders of companies that have understanding of this, like for example Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla Motors and money companies like that. He really understands this situation, and he proposed actually to solve the energy crisis or needs for the United States. We could have a big solar park to run all the energy needs in the whole United States for a I don't know how large the size was, but that's a great idea actually. I hope we will continue to think about it. And also I read somewhere that the amount of sunlight that hits the earth in 1 hour is enough to power to cover the total energy needs of the earth in 1 year. So it's not much sunlight that is needed. So I believe the sun energy as a source is supreme. Also make sure that your electricity to your house are green, that it comes from eco-friendly sources. Because if many people do like that, even if it costs a little more, the energy companies will take it to their ears and listen and change the way they produce the electricity. And another thing you can do is to vote for the political party in your country, if you live in a democracy, to vote for the political party that is the most environment friendly, has the most environment friendly policy. Because this issue, if you think about it, is more important than any other issue, really, actually. And then we have solutions on different scales. If we take the more grander scales, the international scales, we have to make political agreements about pollution restrictions. We have to tax CO2 emissions much higher. I would be very glad if there was a requirement on every flat complex or house that they had to make their own energy actually from the sun or wind or somehow, and couldn't just have the network connection as a kind of backup if the own energy systems would fail. But they should deliver as much as they consume. That would be a very wise thing. And the bigger industries that might need more energy than they could themselves produce could be connected to communal energy sources, but they should be created in an environment-friendly way, to have solar panels in different parts of the country, or wind parks, solar parks, water parks with the waves and tidal waters and so on. There are different solutions on these things. Okay, let me talk a little about what I call the fractal life in life worldview. And this is in opposition to the old mechanistic reductionist worldview, where we consider to be a kind of factory consisting of some 20-30 organs. That is a result of this machinery. We have a life and consciousness and function, and when this body dies, our consciousness is away. That's a very pessimistic reductionist worldview belonging to a materialistic kind of worldview. But the fractal worldview is different. It means that every part of our body, every organ, every cell, every unit, you can say, is a cosmos in itself, and it's a living unit. Because if we think about it, we consist of about 70% water, and in this water inside our body, our different organ resides: our stomach, intestines, our heart, our spleen, our liver, our kidneys, lungs, and everything inside here, the body. And isn't this very resembling, the early life in oceans, where some kind of maybe sea cucumbers or lung-like structures that just were breathing, and jellyfishes like that were existing in the waters? Of course, this is this kind of organs that has, sometime in the history of evolution, come together by symbiosis, forming a greater organism. And later on, it has needed for an addition of some kind of central unit to control everything, and that's the development of the brain and nervous system, everything like that. So, inside here, our organs are actually living units. It's life in life in life in life, and the cells that these organs are consisting of is it in self-living. And the different part of these cells, the organelles, the kernels and so on, are living units in itself, down to the molecules, down to the atoms, down to the electrons, the quarks, and everything down to the tiniest, particle. We are, consisting of billion units of life here, and we are intervened, by bigger life systems. We are part of bigger life systems. Humanity, for example, I like to call the brain cells of the earth. We are forming a network, and we are involved in the thoughts of the earth, especially in our higher plane, and so this is very amazing, that we are a design of 4 billion years of natural engineering, so this is very priceless, this body. And our brains have different layers from different epochs in evolution. The reptilian brain, the limbic brain from the mammals, and the neocortex, the latest part of the brains, also have been added in the evolution. So, we are a very, very interesting creation. I just have to share with you a dream I had a long time ago. I used to lucid dream. That is when you are dreaming, and the very, very clear dreams that you remember very well when you wake up. And this was a dream where I was floating around in the sea, in the water, and it was a very happy state. I was like a dolphin or something, together with other dolphins, playing around. I didn't have a feeling of time or myself or anything, just a playful, joyful ecstasy, bliss, in these waters. There were a lot of light and crystal-like lights, and very beautiful everything. And then suddenly the scene was changed, and I saw myself as I was, like a person. Suddenly I felt separate from my surrounding, and the feeling of time come over me. That was very, very significant. The tick-tack, tick-tack, that, monotony, the time feeling, that is a part of the ego, actually. The disassociation with the fluid, flow of life. And I was standing there, and just looking at the scene, very strange, where there was a lot of machines that were building a kind of factory, and they were digging out things from the earth, and they were making very, very ugly sounds, and the moon was shining, so there was little light on this scene, and it was a very lonely and scary scene, totally opposite to the other scene I had. So after this dream, I just wanted to set my goal of my life to be able to come back to that original state, but of course with my self-consciousness, with my awareness of and knowledge of the other side as well, so we can be in both worlds. I just want to finish this movie by talking about something that I call the narrow band of abundance. And the narrow band of abundance is a kind of universal principle I discovered when I studied the fractals, and how the more interesting attractor points of a fractal, or where the more interesting things are happening, is usually just on a narrow band between something where it goes to zero and that's something that goes to infinity. And if we translate this principle to the real world, we can say that between extreme yang and extreme yin, in the middle there, where yang and yin meet, where there is not too hot and not too cold, there is a narrow band, where something can flourish, that is life, that can flourish in a fantastic multiplical manner and variation that is incredible. And this narrow band of abundance is the nature here on planet Earth. And that's what all this lecture is about, to preserve this narrow band of abundance, this delicate, very fragile band that doesn't happen very often in the universe, because narrow band of abundance is something quite rare, Of course, there are full of planets that have this narrow band of abundance in our galaxy and universe. But, it's something. And also one other thing, we are in the kind of peak of several cycles. This time we are living in right now, one cycle just is the creation of nature, this narrow band of abundance of the Cambrian explosion, you know, where all the species are variation exponentially in the evolutionary tree. That's one cycle that we are almost on top of. Another cycle is the human evolution, you know, the human species that we are, who knows where we come from actually, but you know, we are a very special race, and we are reached a point in our kind of evolution of our mind and heart and everything that's in a kind of a very high peak, you know, I believe so. And also in terms of the information and technology and that we can reach today is also a cycle that we're reaching top notch here. So we are in a very interesting time right now, and a lot of knowledge is available everywhere. So if you know, don't have a clear understanding of what we're doing to this earth, I suggest you really, you know, absorb the essence of this lecture and also continue to talk about the things I talked about in this lecture and to spread it out, either this movie or similar information, because I'm really eager. That is one of my mission in life, is to, you know, spread this message about the earth and try to reach as many intelligent people as possible to hope that this will lead to a change, you know, because I don't know if you've ever heard about the butterfly effect. It was something that was coined, I think, in the 90s or something like that. And it's about the flap of a butterfly, you know, can, you know, give rise to a tornado far away in some near future or distant future. That's because of, you know, something little like, you know, just we talking about this, you hearing this lecture or something like that, can start to create changes in the way your priorities in life. You know, you can realize that this Mother Nature that we have our existence in, that we are a part of, that we are, is something very rare and important, and we must do everything we can in life to save this. And this can give, you know, ripples on the water, so to say. These thought waves can spread out and reach many people and lead to a change. And also don't believe in these climate deniers, because they are bought up by big commercial interests, and you know, they are not serious, because they are full of proficient, you know, academic scholars, researchers, professors, scientists all over the globe that are in very much unison agreement that we are facing a crisis here and we must do something radical about this. So this was my final words of this movie, and I thank you very much for listening to it, and I hope to come back with other kind of movies, maybe in this theme or other related interesting themes. Thank you so much.